Imagine walking into a World Cup match where both teams are secretly hoping to lose, where finding the back of the net could end up being the worst thing that happens to your team, where the smartest move on football's biggest stage isn't to chase victory, but to quietly hope someone else beats you. It sounds completely ridiculous. It goes against everything football is meant to stand for. Yet on Saturday night, that was the unbelievable reality facing Algeria and Austria. On paper, this was a World Cup match that neither team truly wanted to win. So how does something like this even happen? How can the biggest tournament in football create a situation where winning becomes a punishment instead of a reward? To answer that, we need to dive into the strange, fascinating, and slightly broken world of World Cup permutations, and the incredible way this story eventually unfolded. If you strip football down to its basics, it's probably the simplest sport in the world. 2 teams, 90 minutes. Score more goals than your opponent and you win. Even a child can understand those rules. But once you reach the final round of the World Cup group stage, that beautiful simplicity suddenly disappears. Because now, winning isn't the only thing that matters. What matters just as much is who you'll be forced to play next if you do. And in this story, that entire problem can be summed up in one word: Spain. On Friday night, Spain defeated Uruguay 1-0 to finish on top of Group H, the reigning European champions, the third-ranked team in the world, and one of the strongest favorites to lift the World Cup. According to the tournament bracket, Spain would now face whoever finished second in Group J. In other words, finishing second no longer felt like a reward. It felt like a punishment that immediately put Algeria and Austria in an impossible position. Whoever won this match would almost certainly finish second and walk straight into a clash with Spain. But thanks to FIFA's new tournament format, the team finishing third could still sneak into the knockout stage as one of the best third-place teams and avoid Spain altogether, potentially drawing a much kinder opponent like Switzerland instead. Think about how unbelievable that sounds. Winning sent you straight into the lion's den. Drawing, or even losing, could hand you a far easier path through the knockout rounds and dramatically improve your chances of making a deep run in the tournament. For once, victory carried the toughest punishment imaginable, while failure promised the easier road. Welcome to the bizarre world of World Cup mathematics, where collecting 3 points could actually leave you worse off than collecting none. Austria's situation made this even stranger. A win, or even a draw, almost certainly pointed them toward Spain, but a defeat could drop them into third place, allow them to qualify on tiebreakers, and set up a far more favorable round of 32 meeting with Switzerland. On paper, losing wasn't a disaster. It was arguably the best possible outcome. Imagine being Ralph Rangnick, preparing your team for a World Cup match where the statistically perfect result was to be beaten. Algeria's situation, however, was much more delicate. And this is the detail that changed everything. Their ideal result wasn't defeat, it was a draw. A draw would likely move them into third place, qualify them as one of the tournament's best third-place teams, and most importantly, keep them away from Spain. But there was one major catch. A defeat would almost certainly end their World Cup. Statistical models gave them less than a 1% chance of advancing if they lost. So Algeria couldn't simply sit back and surrender. They had to avoid defeat, while not really wanting victory either. It was an almost impossible balancing act. One mistake in either direction could completely reshape their tournament. And if this bizarre situation sounds strangely familiar, that's because football has been here before, with these exact same 2 nations. The last time it happened, it produced one of the most infamous scandals in World Cup history. But there was one crucial detail that stopped this entire situation from turning into a complete farce. While Austria could actually benefit from defeat, Algeria couldn't afford to lose. A loss would almost certainly end their World Cup campaign on the spot. According to statistical projections, their chances of qualifying after a defeat were less than 1%. In other words, Algeria couldn't simply throw the game. They needed to avoid defeat, while at the same time knowing that victory wasn't necessarily the outcome they wanted either. They were trying to walk a razor-thin line that barely even existed, and if this entire scenario feels strangely familiar, there's a good reason for that. Football has seen almost this exact situation before, involving these very same 2 nations. And it ended with one of the darkest and most controversial chapters in World Cup history. Let's rewind to the 1982 FIFA World Cup in Spain. The city was Gijón. The match was West Germany against Austria. By the time kickoff arrived, Algeria had already played their final group match and could do nothing except sit back, watch, and hope the result went their way. The equation was incredibly simple. If West Germany won by 1 or 2 goals, both Germany and Austria would qualify for the next round, while Algeria would be eliminated. That was the one scoreline that suited both teams perfectly. Then, just 10 minutes into the match, West Germany scored through Horst Hrubesch, and from that moment on, football simply disappeared. Instead of pushing for another goal or searching for an equalizer, both teams appeared completely satisfied with the scoreline. For more than an hour, they casually knocked the ball around the pitch, passing sideways, passing backwards, making no real attempt to attack, create chances, or even pretend they wanted another goal. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't clever. It unfolded right in front of the entire world. The fans inside the stadium couldn't believe what they were watching. Boos echoed around the ground. Whistles rained down from every stand. Some furious supporters even began burning banknotes as a symbol of what they believed football had become, a game where the result had already been agreed without anyone saying a single word. Meanwhile, Algeria watched helplessly as their World Cup dream disappeared without kicking another ball. They felt robbed. Supporters around the world shared that anger, and the match would forever be remembered as the Disgrace of Gijón, one of the most infamous moments the sport has ever witnessed. To FIFA's credit, they didn't ignore the controversy. Instead, they changed the rules. Beginning with the 1986 World Cup, every final group stage match would kick off at exactly the same time. That way, no team could calculate the perfect result after seeing what had already happened elsewhere. If anyone wanted to manipulate the standings, they would have to do it blindly, without knowing whether the other result was actually helping them or hurting them. It remains one of the rare occasions where FIFA identified a loophole and genuinely fixed it, and that history was exactly why so many people were nervous heading into Saturday night's meeting between Algeria and Austria 44 years after the events of Gijón. The same two countries had somehow found themselves trapped in another bizarre situation where playing for anything other than victory could actually make more sense. Before the match had even started, some fans and journalists were already calling it the disgrace of Kansas City, fearing history was about to repeat itself all over again. The nightmare scenario was obvious. A slow, lifeless match where neither side took risks. Two teams casually passing the ball around, refusing to attack because both knew that avoiding victory could actually improve their chances of progressing. But this wasn't just about Algeria and Austria anymore. There was another nation whose entire World Cup depended on what happened over those 90 minutes. That nation was Iran. Iran had already completed all of their group stage matches. Their players couldn't influence anything anymore. All they could do was sit together, watch the game unfold from their hotel, and hope for one specific thing, a winner. It didn't matter whether that winner was Algeria or Austria. They simply needed anyone to win, because a draw was the one result that would send Iran crashing out of the tournament. Suddenly, the emotions surrounding this match became even more powerful. While Algeria and Austria had every tactical reason to settle for a cautious draw, millions of Iranian fans were desperately praying for the exact opposite. They wanted chaos. They wanted attacking football. They wanted mistakes, drama, late goals, anything that would produce a winner. For one pair of teams, a quiet draw looked like the perfect outcome. For an entire nation, it looked like the end of their World Cup. So what actually happened? This is where the story took a turn that absolutely nobody expected. Every fear surrounding this match turned out to be completely misplaced. Instead of witnessing another disgrace, football fans were treated to one of the most thrilling matches of the entire group stage. Rather than playing it safe, Algeria and Austria produced an end-to-end battle packed with drama, momentum swings, and unforgettable moments. Austria landed the first blow through veteran striker Marko Arnautovic, giving them the early advantage. But Algeria refused to fold under pressure and quickly fought their way back into the contest. Before long, Austria restored their lead thanks to Marcel Sabitzer, only for Algeria to respond once again. Led by their talisman Riyad Mahrez, they equalized for a second time and showed they were willing to risk everything instead of settling for the comfortable result everyone had predicted. There was, however, one brief moment when the ghosts of history seemed ready to return. During a strange 15-minute spell late in the game, the tempo suddenly slowed. The ball was passed harmlessly across the pitch, moving sideways and backwards far more than forwards. The crowd immediately sensed what was happening. Whistles echoed around the stadium, while supporters sarcastically started doing the Mexican wave. fearing they were about to witness another version of the infamous Disgrace of Gijón. At one stage, Algeria completed an astonishing 109 consecutive passes without creating a meaningful attack. For a few nervous minutes, it genuinely looked as though both teams had decided that preserving the scoreline was more important than chasing victory. The atmosphere inside the stadium became increasingly uncomfortable as memories of 1982 briefly came back to life. But then, just when everyone thought the match was drifting toward a controversial finish, everything changed. Deep into stoppage time, Riyad Mahrez produced what seemed to be the defining moment of the night. He found the breakthrough, fired Algeria into a dramatic 3-2 lead, and sent the Algerian supporters into absolute chaos. The celebrations were unforgettable because, at that exact moment, another country was celebrating too. Hundreds of miles away, Iran's players and fans believed they had been handed a lifeline. After spending the entire evening praying for anybody to win the match, they finally had the result they desperately needed. For nearly 2 incredible minutes, Iran believed they had pulled off a miracle, but football can be unbelievably cruel. With virtually the final touch of the entire match, Austria launched one last desperate attack. The ball was delivered into the penalty area, where substitute Sasa Kalajic rose above everyone else and powered a header into the back of the net. 3-3. A goal that changed absolutely everything. Austria's manager later described it as the kind of finish you could practice 1,000 times and still never recreate. Yet that single header completely reshaped the group standings in an instant. Instead of one team progressing and the other going home, both Austria and Algeria advanced to the knockout rounds together. Iran, however, experienced one of the most heartbreaking moments of the tournament. After spending almost 2 glorious minutes believing they had qualified, their dream disappeared in the blink of an eye. They went from the joy of survival to the agony of elimination without even kicking another ball. Ironically, the match that everyone feared would become one of football's greatest embarrassments ended up becoming one of the tournament's greatest advertisements for the sport. After the final whistle, Algeria's coach summed it up perfectly. Football won. And it was hard to argue with him. The simultaneous kickoffs, the players' competitive spirit, and the natural desire to win proved stronger than every mathematical calculation, suggesting that losing might actually have been the smarter option. Pride ultimately defeated strategy. When everything was finally settled, Austria finished second in the group, meaning they earned the difficult reward of facing Spain in the knockout stage. Algeria, meanwhile, advanced as one of the best third-place teams and successfully avoided the tournament favorites. In the end, the tournament bracket delivered one final twist of irony. Austria's dramatic late equalizer kept them alive, but it also handed them the toughest possible opponent. Algeria, despite not winning the match, walked away with the more favorable route. Sometimes, football has a strange way of getting the last laugh. The game that nobody was supposed to want to win ended up becoming one of the most unforgettable matches of the entire World Cup. So here's the question. If your team could improve its chances of winning the World Cup by deliberately losing a match, would you actually want them to lose? Or would that go against everything football is supposed to stand for? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed this story, stick around. Because the knockout rounds are where this tournament becomes even more ruthless.